Hi, and welcome to the Ethanol Producer Magazine video podcast. I am your host, Anna Simet. I am here live at the International Fuel Ethanol Workshop and Expo in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And my special guest today is Chris Malone from Indigo Ag. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I understand that you just finished presenting on a panel about the 45Z tax credit.
That's right. Happy to continue the conversation here with you all.
Wonderful. So I think, how about we start today by having you give us an overview of Indigo Ag and its role in the low carbon fuels market. You know, how did you become involved in this initiative?
Yeah, so we've been working in sustainability around row crop agriculture since 2018. I actually joined it in 2019 as part of that. And so, you know, when you think about producing low CI ag commodities, corn, soybeans, wheat, that's something that we started doing on the 2019 crop, actually with rice that year for Anheuser-Busch. That was our first pilot customer. And so, yeah, over the last 6 seasons, we've built out a lot of methods and technologies and ways of working to be able to deliver and trace and create value for low CI crops. And you know, every year we add more and more companies that work with us. Traditionally in the voluntary market and in places like food and protein and fashion, you know, some crops go into clothing, of course.
Right.
And we're really, you know, leader in that space. I myself actually had a background in consulting and oil and gas and other energy areas and commodities, and so I had some familiarity with there. And then, you know, a couple of years ago, the prices in California and a few of these CI-based fuel markets started to really come up and get people's attention. And so that was kind of the impetus for us a couple of years ago now to start to get involved and really take that message out that, you know, scoring feedstocks for CI is very doable. There's systems in place today, there's technology breakthroughs that have made this possible, and it's a huge opportunity for these fuels markets where most of the alternative fuels are biofuels and most of their CI scores in farming, and probably the most movable part of the CI is farming. So we saw it as a layup. We've done a lot of policy work, and we're excited to see in programs now in 45Z and in Canada and others where they're starting to accept those practices to be used.
Such a hot topic right now. So you've mentioned that farming presents a significant opportunity for the decarbonization of biofuels. Can you explain why this is the case and why biofuel producers and regulators should be excited about low CI crops?
Yeah, I think the light bulb for us, you know, several years ago now was people think of farming as a source of emissions, but in reality it serves the potential to be an enormous sink. You know, when you grow a crop, I mean, we all learned about photosynthesis in high school.
Right.
It is sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere. That is, you know, part of the crop, you know, that is made of things like carbon and nitrogen and oxygen, etc. And so there's a great opportunity to kind of pull that out of the air. Now, business as usual is it all goes back up. But, you know, what if it didn't? Can you hold on to it in different ways? And, you know, I think CCS is interesting. You know, that is a topic that has taken the ethanol industry by storm. Everyone understands CCS. They're excited about the impact of CCS. But if you think about CCS, you know, you're just taking some of the CO2 that was in the kernel of the crop and sequestering that. And that alone has this big impact. So think about the rest of the plant, the stover, you know, the stalk, the roots, the leaves, the corn cob. There's a lot more carbon in that plant than just the kernel that we could be playing with here. And yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do that. The one that we've focused on the most is in soil carbon. So typical farming today, people think about soils degrading and actually releasing CO2, but you can farm in a way where you hold on to that carbon, you aggregate and build soils. That acts as a huge sink of carbon. And it also helps with the crop. You know, healthier soil has more carbon in it.
Right.
But there are other opportunities as well to make big swings at decarbonization, both on emissions from farming and, of course, just farming as a carbon sink.
Really well explained. Thank you. So let's shift to the regulatory landscape a little bit. You know, although we don't have all the details on how climate-smart agriculture or low CI ag feedstocks will be integrated into these programs, we do know quite a bit already. What information has been disclosed so far, and how does Indigo's solution help biofuel producers comply with those regulations?
So, I think there's certainly emphasis on what we don't know yet, and it's important that we get those answers. And there is The 45Z statute in the Inflation Reduction Act says that the Treasury must give that guidance by the end of this year. It was kind of different than the others where we saw them move. That doesn't mean they'll definitely do it, but they would be kind of breaking the law if they don't. So hopefully that means we'll get it at the end of the year. But we do know a lot already, and I think sometimes that is almost glazed over. Even in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was a ton of information about how this will work. It told us about payments and how they work. It introduced how credit transfer works. It introduced how direct payment works. And then we've gotten more guidance since then about kind of model use and practices and other things that will work. And then the biggest batch of information came out a little over a month ago, and that was with the 40B regulations.
Right.
And I think most people will think of 40B and they'll say, okay, well, that's a different thing. That's a temporary blender's credit for SAF. The reason that there was a huge interagency panel and all this lobbying money and all this emphasis into building that was obvious, is because you can basically think of it as 45Z version 0. They were not worried about, we make a trivial amount of SAF in the United States and this program expires at the end of the year.
Yeah.
That emphasis was not for that. It is because this is a line where this is all going. And 45Z is hugely important. It's on over 20 billion gallons of fuel and will serve as precedent for other markets. And so that's why you saw so much emphasis on that and so many agencies leaning in and so much work. And the release, we thought was really great. There was a lot more information in there that we were honestly thinking we would ever get.
Yeah.
Really clear on verification and data and a lot of things like that even the regulators were thinking they would probably have to just interpret. It's pretty clear. There's clear sign that ethanol is in play. The new 40B GREET model treats, I think, ethanol very fairly. There's a lot of options for ethanol to decarbonize. There's CCS, there's the potential to buy RECs, there's other things you can do with power and heat. There are an indirect land use change penalty, which I don't. People debate if this should exist at all, but it certainly was better, more fair than where the process started. It came down a lot in the last year and a half. And so, ethanol plants are really, they're in the game.
Yeah.
And that was uncertain before. And, it introduced kind of something more like a pathway. They even use that language. And so you can, take parts of your ethanol and put it into different pathways and have different scores. You can work on segments of it. And so people, have that potential to get started on a part of their plant, start making money, and figure out how they expand it to the rest, which I thought was great. And then lastly, Climate Smart Ag was in there, kind of. Vilsack described it as a stepping stone the day it came out, and then you saw it. It certainly was. They don't have emissions factors for ag. They don't have it working in the model yet. There was kind of a temporary workaround, which is fine because no SAF's actually made with U.S.-based crops. But that's true, and we'll see where that lands. But it did tell us a lot as well. Very clear definitions of what these three practices that we have so far are, and I think they were fair. Very clear understanding of what data is required, very clear understanding of what verification is required from a third party. So we're just happy to see that. It's a lot of things that we can now do in our pilot programs and know they'll be okay and reduces our uncertainty.
Your optimistic perspective is really refreshing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk the future of low carbon fuels markets. Looking ahead, how do you envision the low carbon fuels market evolving, and what steps will fuel producers need to take to differentiate themselves in this really competitive landscape?
So I think the CI world has won. We had different ways of trying to do this in the past, and what was kind of started in California and British Columbia about a decade ago, it has won, and that's what we're seeing happen everywhere now. And so, and I think that's great because it's great for ethanol, quite frankly, because ethanol's sometimes been shut out, and so now everyone has to compete. You can't be a fuel that just maybe a certain group likes, another group dislikes. Now everyone's competing on CI, and the fuel that can generate the lowest CI wins. And so it kind of just creates a competitive landscape, which is what a lot of people have been advocating for. And so I think you'll see CIs everywhere. I think as these programs grow, you'll see CI-based programs. That CI will probably be important on every bit of alternative fuel that exists in the United States, and potentially even on traditional fuels. The other thing that I would say to be prepared for is a multi-CI world. I think people say, like, oh, what's my CI? The problem is, there is an absolute answer to that, but every single program is going to give you a slightly imperfect version of that. So your ethanol CI is going to be slightly different in California, in Canada, in British Columbia, in
Right.
the 45Z. And so you're going to have to think about managing ethanol that's going to look better or worse in certain markets, and how do you want to play that into your strategy? And the same thing as the corn is in more of these, the same thing will be true. You're not going to have corn that looks amazing in one and terrible in another, but it will vary based on how they calculate it and what practices they allow. So multi-CI is certainly part of the future, and it's a big opportunity for ethanol providers to think about that in their corn procurement strategy or with their partners who do that. A lot of CI reduction is CapEx. It takes years. This is something that you need the farmers to be able to be doing this stuff, of course, but you don't have to deploy CapEx yourself. This is more kind of OpEx. You can scale it up and more quickly, and it's I think CCS is exciting right now, but this is really the area that into the future has by far the biggest opportunity to decarbonize and drive ethanol scores very negative.
Okay. So, Chris, for biofuel plants interested in transitioning to these low CI feedstocks, how should they begin, and are there any specific actions that they should be taking right now to kind of prepare for this shift?
Yeah, our philosophy is don't wait. And you don't have to throw everything you've got at this, but start to look at this. And we're advising people to run a pilot this year. I mean, 45Z is going to start next year, and that ethanol for most of that year will be based on 2024 corn. And so you can start to pilot and learn how this will work now. Do no regrets moves. I mean, there's some level of risk in all of this because we have some guidance for sure. We don't have every bit of guidance.
Right.
But going out there and having a percent of the plant that has you can go out and get the really great farms, at least to start with, if you're comfortable. Focus on the 3 practices we know, maybe ones that will probably be most likely to know the next guidance. And start to engage farmers as well as vendors like us that can help you do that. Talk to them, let them know you're thinking about this, hear what they have to say. Talk to vendors, figure out how they can help you, figure out what you're going to need versus what you want to do. And really what that will do, it'll put you in position to scale quickly. The payout for this stuff is such where it is material on your bottom line, and so you want to be positioned to be taking advantage of this quickly and being able to have that additional cushion or that additional profit margin there, and not be where I think some people are with CCS, where they're like, well, man, I want to do it, but now it's 4 years away because I'm starting now. And I'll just say Indigo, we're very interested in this opportunity. We're willing to share risk, to partner, not just to be a vendor. We're happy with arrangements where we only make money if you're making money. We're happy to kind of strategically work on this together. We have a full plan of what we think this year should look like, just based on our experience running these programs and our knowledge of the verification. It's moldable, but it's kind of a starting point. And so for plants that are interested, please reach out, and we're happy to walk you through it and see what you think and get something started so you can start to make your very first moves.
Very good. This conversation has been super interesting. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to add?
I think it's generally, and I think I've touched on this, but in summary, CI is where we're going.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do there. Ethanol has honestly more options than almost any other pathway to decarbonize in CI, just new things that could be done that haven't been done in the past. And so, it's exciting. And look, the regulations will change always as they do. But as they've gone down this path, and as you get plants built based on this use case, it's going to persist. And I think it's a fair and efficient way for the government to be involved.
Well, thanks so much, Chris, for coming on the podcast and telling our viewers more about Indigo Ag.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our viewers, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time.